Hello and welcome everyone to the ZEF Podcast. With me today are Amit Kumar and Arslan Waheed. They are junior researchers here at ZEF and members of the working group ZEF in the City. Welcome and thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for the time.
So let me introduce them both. Amit has a bachelor's degree in history from the University of Delhi and a master's degree in social work from the Tata Institute in Mumbai. His research is about the slum movement, self-organization and mobilization of activist citizens living in unrecognized slums of Mumbai. His research is funded by the Right Livelihood College and the German Academic Exchange Service. Arslan has a bachelor's degree in political science from the GC University in Lahore and a master's degree in Pakistan studies from the Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. His research topic is development discourse and the urban poor, a comparative study of slums of Islamabad and Brasilia. His research is also funded by the German Academic Exchange Service. So we will talk about urban development today, and you both contributed articles to the latest issue of ZEFnews, which is our biannual magazine, and I will put the links to your articles in the description of this podcast. What is your personal interest in this research? Why did you choose this topic and why did you choose these cities? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your motivation.
Yeah, so in my case, I did my master's from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, and in my first year, I joined municipal corporation as a student social worker, and there I was engaged with public health department and particularly with slums, looking at the mobilization against dengue, and we will also organize camps, also to spread information about what kind of precautions one should take and how we should go about it. So from there on, I was engaged with these question of slums and its temporariness and the way these slums are treated. Whenever I visit, I see that they do not have papers, they have no records, and it's very difficult for them to justify their presence as such. So I tried to deal a little more deeper into this question in my master's thesis when I was where I did my research on everyday life experiences of women waste picker in particular. And from there on, I came across this Right Livelihood College network, who's one of the laureates is Medha Patkar, who is also engaged with the movements of slum dwellers there in Mumbai. She has spearheaded this movement. So that's how, then from there on, I could build upon all these experiences and everything on my research proposal, and I got into doing this research from there on. Yes.
Well, in my case, it's not really a personal experience being a part of administration as such, but when I was doing my master's from Qaid University in Islamabad, and this is for the first time I went to the city. Before that, I was in Lahore, which is very big city, and it's very crowded, and it's hundreds of years old as well. But when I went to Islamabad and I saw that, okay, the city looks to me very clean, everything's very planned, it's grid pattern, everything is organized, and the names are very scientific as well. Traditionally we always have names to the different settlements of the different towns. In Lahore, it was Johor town, Ilham Iqbal town, named after the person. But in case of Islamabad, they came up with a neutral name F sector, G sector, H sector. So I thought, okay, the city is different. And by the time I realized that, okay, the city has been planned right from the scratch and like everything is planned, and the celebration of Islamabad as a model city was very much part of the everyday discussion when you are in Islamabad and you talk to people about the history of the city. And it always like doing something to me that, okay, if the city is planned from the scratch, is everything is planned in the city, how come we have like so many slums in the city? What could possibly be the reasons? What if there is something wrong, or why would we be having slums in Islamabad, especially when the city is planned? Everything they must be taking care of everything. But it was like already more than 20 slums by then in Islamabad, and the landmass of the slums was continuously increasing ever since, especially from 1990s onwards. And that's what that motivates me to understand, okay, if the city is being celebrated as a development project, if everyone is talking about the potential of planning as a source to transform the society, then why does city end up being a similar city, like in terms of slums? And when I was digging deeper into it and I started doing my research in masters, I came to know that, oh, it's not the only cities and that is planned and having slums. Brasilia is another one, and in some of the documents from the archives in Islamabad, they say that we should try our level best to learn from the experience of Brasilia. We should not let any slums be coming to Islamabad as it happened in Brasilia. So when I was doing my master research, I came to know, okay, I already know what I'm going to do for my PhD. So if they are learning from Brasilia, that means somehow the both of the cities are talking to each other. The planners of that time, they were representing these intellectuals or these planners who are working on the global scale. And that feeling came true when I realized that, okay, the guy who motivated Brasilia and the guy who planned Islamabad, they were working like in so many countries in 60s. They were introducing these planning rationales everywhere, and almost every one of their cities, like Chandigarh in India, every one of those cities end up having slums, or at least ignoring the urban poor. And that's what I thought, okay, I should do something about that in terms of research. I need to understand what happened. Yeah.
Cities are growing at an intense speed, in number and size all over the world. More people live in urban areas than in rural areas by now. On a global scale, urbanization is mostly the result of an impoverished rural population moving to the cities. So, because the people are mostly poor, urbanization is often an expansion of what we call slums. Since the UN report Challenge of Slums in 2003, urban poverty has become a major concern over the last decade. In the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, goal number 11 defines the goal to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, and resilient and sustainable. Still, according to the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, 24% of the global urban population still lives in slums. So, what exactly defines a slum? What would you say as experts in this field?
It's always been a very difficult thing to define a slum. Slum is more than an informal settlement or a congested or an illegal settlement or congested neighborhoods, as most of the definition implies in the public policy or in these international development magazines and reports. But I always find that it's more than the poor infrastructure. It's always more than the poor economic conditions of the resident. In fact, based on my research, not all of the slum dwellers, they are poor, and not all of them are illegal as well. So for me, slum is not a fact. It's not really a neutral category, which can be described by either economic or the legal denominators. But I would say that slums represent a social spatial structures. It's an outcome of the response from the society at large. So slums is something like it's stigma. It denotes the vulnerability. It denotes the criminality, and it's it's kind of patronizing or like giving a sense to the social deviance that defines slums. So I think all of them are social constructs. So probably the definitions from the economic or legal point of view would not be enough to understand what a slum is.
Thank you. And Amit, what would you say? What is a slum? Or would you agree with Arslan, or what's your working definition?
I agree with Arslan that merely legal and economic denominators is not enough to define slums. And not only just legalities or the so-called poor income groups live there, but also slums are many times viewed as dilapidated structures, like where the materials in particular which the slums are made of is different from the others. But how I view in particular how is the temporariness of these structures. I see that how these are those structures which are always somewhere gray, like sometime they can go towards more legal, looking at the institutional setup or the negotiations they had, and sometimes they are also demolished. So I see it as more where they can be demolished, they can be dispossessed.
Yeah, thanks. And you've also been in Mumbai to do research there on the ground, and you've been to Brasilia and Islamabad where you did your research, Aslan. So maybe we talk about your experience when you were there. What struck you the most? What were the biggest challenges there?
Okay, so what struck me the most was the knowledge which these people possess and how smartly they deal in their daily lives as well as also in such situations when their houses are being demolished. So they, many times we reach to our respondents thinking of that we have a bigger picture about the situation they are in. But apparently what I realized is that they possess a certain, like, they do have a bigger picture in their mind. They do navigate themselves at very different levels from the community or like the particular settlements they come from, or negotiating with the city authorities, or also sometimes it goes beyond that to negotiate their structures at national levels, and also sometimes involving a lot of actors from the international agencies and so.
And your experience, Aslan?
Yeah, I think for me it's not just, I mean, my motivation or the thing that struck me most is not like really in the field, but it was mostly before going to the field work, before going to the slums of Islamabad and Brasilia, because they didn't happen overnight. I mean, for me, these two cities, they were like planned cities. They were planned, as the official discourses say, from the scratch. So, I mean, I don't know. It always fascinates me to know, to attempt to understand what would be the reasons why there were slums in those settlements which are planned to be the model cities for the whole of the global south. So that idea that struck me when I was in the field, even before going to the field. And this is the question I'm afraid I still cannot answer even during my research, because I just cannot make sense of this whole discourse that has been given to me, or that I could find in my field work, that they just happened. I mean, like, as if they happened overnight. How could the planners, they ignored hundreds and thousands of the people who are working in the construction of those cities? The people were there, and they were there when the city was planning. They were talking about the necessary labor they would be needing to construct the city. They were talking, and they were constructing the cities, and the people were there, and they kept dislocating them from one settlement to another. So I don't think so that they were not there and they happened to be there when the city was inaugurated, like in 6 days. And I still don't know. I mean, and this is the one part that struck me most, that how could all of the hundred and thousands of people couldn't get to the table of planner? Why the planner was not talking about them? Why he or she at that time ignored altogether such huge number of people from making the city? And in response to that, when I just talked to the people there about slums, they are pretty clear that it's their survival strategy. They are claiming the space that has been not given to them, that has been denied to them during the planning process.
As you both in your article point out the problem that the urban poor are often identified with dirt, drugs, and danger, as you say, Arslan, in your article, and Amit, in your article, you show that people occupying these dumping grounds in Mumbai, they are also like identified with the waste by the city officials as something to get rid of. So how do you explain this identification of poor people and their rejection? What's the reason of this process?
Like I have mentioned already, for example, the very idea of slums, for me, it has a lot to do with the social constructionism, or the response of the society at large toward a particular segment of people. Similar is the case when we're talking about, at least in those cities like Brasilia and Islamabad. For example, they were not really talked about, the construction workers, or the people working poor. They were not really entertained in terms of the distribution of resources when it comes to the urban planning. And one they make happen, like Amit was referring to Ananya Roy, this informality is more like a distinctive rationality. It's a way of doing things as well. It's just not ignoring things. So the unplanned is another way of planning something. So when it comes to the urban poor who are being associated with the drugs, for example, or dirt, or the danger or threat perceptions, that's another way of state like to plan those unplanned settlements or to stigmatize those people. And this reason, I mean, for example, they are just not being illegal. They are constructed as a whole set of socially deviant people who should be discouraged not only by the state. In this way, when you associate someone with the dirt or the source of drugs, for example, if you associate someone as a threat to environment, you are actually empowering the citizens, other people around them, to take actions themselves, to criminalize those people. Like everyone will be doing something, everyone will be controlling something, everyone will be policing, and that's how the association is actually empowering the state structures. They are empowering the state narratives in which they are discouraging slums. They are not completely removing them. It's part of the reason that I could find in my research is that all of the people who are living there, they are needed by the cities. They are needed by the people for their menial jobs, for example. Unless you provide them with enough opportunities of housing, you would be needing slums. Since you want to control them, since you don't want to expand them, that's how you come up with this whole narrative of drugs, dirt, and danger, so that they can be kept under control and strict surveillance.
So it's kind of a strategy to legitimize like oppression of these people.
Yeah, in a way, that's true.
So, and how do you see the situation in Mumbai with the rejection of these people dwelling in the slums?
So how I see the identification of these people in the city is that India and also Pakistan, like the South Asia, is a caste society. So if you talk about dirt, if you talk about the people who have been engaging with dirt, those are those people who do not belong to the caste society, those who are untouchables and outcast. So if you see for a long duration of time, urban has been viewed, or migrating from rural to urban, as mostly emancipatory. You can call it as a myth because it bursted out. After a while, it exploded, and so movement from rural to urban has been mostly viewed as something like this. Urban is not caste society, but now here is the trick. So the new neoliberal players, or so-called the private players, and all these. So they are they are still taking advantage of the caste society. So it is a nexus between the caste and the neoliberal which plays out in the city to keep those people who have always been dealing with the waste and dirt, and who are still and should continue to deal with it as such.
So that's an interesting point. So there is a promise of freedom and equality in this, in the space of the city, but then people moving there, and this hope is betrayed. So a new sort of inequality is reproduced,
Exactly.
kind of. Mhm.
Exactly. So I'll give you an example. You see, the modernizing of the industries, for example, the textile industry. So all these people who were dealing in the old textile industries, like mostly hand weavers and all, they were discriminated at a level in the caste society. But when things were modernizing, they thought that their status will also be enhanced, or they'll be emancipated from these kind of stigmas. But when they come to urban society, they are no more welcomed in the modernized textile industry, because then those modernized spaces are taken over by the caste society, and these people are outcasts.
You describe how the urban poor organize themselves and develop strategies to resist their marginalization. How do these actions look like? What is the political outlook of these struggles?
So, giving you a little bit background of where it all started, and then I'll come also to the mechanisms of these struggles or protests they do. So, in 2004, there was like a McKinsey report, how to like making Mumbai world-class city, and they gave some recommendations on how to really go about it, which led to massive demolitions throughout Mumbai. Like more than 100,000 houses were demolished at the time, and that's how all these people from different communities, they came together to resist. So it was like street marches to also sit-in protests. So they sit in this street marches. Of course, they go through slogans and symbols with banners and raising their demands loud, maybe also using louder speakers for that and all, and going through the city streets. But with the sit-in protests, it's also very interesting. A lot of also academicians, researchers, and other people having different problems with the government, they also come on the stage to share their experiences, how they have dealt with situations, bringing different sets of data by researchers to talk to people about like how it has been and how in the past they have dealt with it. So likewise, like sit-in protest, and other than that, they also went something they call is like making the law unlawful. So it's like so what they did, they demolished these settlements and then they put wire saying that you cannot construct houses after this boundary. And these people, they actually cut the fences saying that we are going to violate law by making this law unlawful. And then there was large number of people who went to jail. So it's also in like Hindi we call it like jail bharo andolan, fill jails with the people. So these are different kind of mechanisms they employ from time to time whenever they face demolitions or such kind of repressions from the state.
And what is the political outlook of these struggles? What's like a central demand or a goal they want to achieve with their fight against this law, to make this law unlawful?
So, name of the protest is Ghar Banao, Ghar Bachao Andolan. make house and protect it. So the demand in itself is there in the name, that we will together build our houses and also protect it from demolitions.
So to get their housing recognized as a lawful settlement, and like in the context of a right to the city, they have the right to build their houses and to live there.
Yes, that's also one of the points, but the whole idea is very basic, just to protect the house from demolitions. And also slowly, incrementally build it. Build it not just by recognizing through a state as such. Build it like changing the structure, changing the way houses are patterned within the settlements, making it in the manner that it can challenge the legal law, challenge the state's notion as such. You changing it or building it in a manner that can challenge the way it is looked at, challenge the way it is defined.
Yeah, thank you. So, Arslan, are there similar struggles of the urban poor in Brasilia and Islamabad? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's true. And I would say actually the struggles for the urban poor to not in terms of just to organize, but to get their share in the urban spaces, for that matter, it started ever since, even I would say, before the inauguration of these cities. For example, it's interesting to note that in Brasilia, before the inauguration of the city, one of the settlement that got the legal status was actually a slum settlement. So they recognized that settlement, they recognized the people and their right of living there before the inauguration of the city. And all this happened, it was not like that they just do it, it was a struggle of the people. They were not only raising their voices, they were already going through strikes, they were already doing the long processions, and in fact they stopped working on some of the projects when they were constructing the city, to make sure that their rights should be recognized, even though that was not, the settlement was not part of the plan, but it was their activities, it was their political mobilization that made sure that even before Brasilia, I would say, before Brasilia was like officially established on the ground, a slum was established before that, and it was legalized and recognized by the state authorities. So their demands, for example, like in case of India, were very clear. The need to have a house, the right that is to be recognized of them being a human and needs shelter. And that is the case with Islamabad as well. For example, if I could narrate you an incident from one of the archives, the people, when the first construction camp that was made temporary to house the construction workers, and when they were trying to remove that, because the construction of that particular segment was completed, people, they just did not accept it as such. They went on to protest. They led the processions, and unless the processions goes on, unless they were given an alternative space, which unfortunately was illegal as well. They just like informally patronize, okay, we are removing you from here, but you can go there. So I mean, like, instead of one slums, they just moved to another slum. But I would say that the struggle that started from like 1960s end up being fruitful in 2000, when 10 of the slums, for the first time in the history of Islamabad, 10 of the slums were given the legal status, they were legalized. So it's like we're talking about the struggle for over 40 years. And in that 40 years, the things were like going up and down. Sometimes they really made to the national media, and sometimes they were completely ignored by almost everyone in the society. And even today, this like if you are following the mainstream media or the mainstream political debates, you only end up listening to the issues of slum, for example, in Islamabad, only when there is a demolition drive, when the authorities are trying to remove one of the slums. So I would say they still are engaged. They still are very clear about the recognition of their right. They still are struggling about that. But the momentum and the coverage to that struggle and the intensity varies. Sometimes it's like way too strong. It's like coming up on every forum, like covered by the social media and the media as well. And sometimes it's completely off the radar, because things are like normalized. Even their illegal status is somehow being protected by so many informal arrangements. I mean, we're talking about from corruption to everything here. But as long as they don't feel threatened to their homes, they are not really vibrant. But that doesn't mean they are okay with that. They are still conscious that they still have to do, and they are doing it by aligning themselves with a number of other forums, NGOs, political parties, like a smaller scale, or making their own alliances on a national level, like Kachi Abadi Alliance, for example. That's just not about Islamabad. That's about the whole of the Pakistan. The slums are coming together. They are talking to each other.
Yeah, so it's like a complex web of different actors and with different interests, like political parties, city planners, and then the interest of the people living there in the communities. And they organizing at the grassroots level. And then we have like the UN Sustainable Development Goals I mentioned at the beginning, and this goal to make cities inclusive, safe, and so on. So we have all this whole political field. And what do you see as the role of scientific research? Because you are researchers, and what can science contribute to this whole field and to these problems in the cities?
So there are many ways I think scientific community can engage with this matter. First of all, like I can see like how, suppose in the case of Arslan, like he's working in Brazil and Islamabad, so of course making a different kind of connections, and also scientific community can develop new solidarities, as I was talking about. That is there. And third thing is also about the translation. Like you might learn something new done in different context, and then you bring it to your context. And fourth thing, I think it's also about like how we have certain resources. We have like institutions like ZEF, which actually like provide with a space and so that different people can actually like interact with each other in a or engage with these questions, and not only that, but also sometimes these kind of engagements are important to press these questions, or in the sense like to make these questions as something urgent which has to be taken up now. So I see like multiple ways people can engage.
Yeah, that's true. I'm completely agreeing to Amit. I would just like to, I mean, the points are same. That's true for like Islamabad or Brasilia. I think I would say for any of the cities who is having this kind of issues in terms of their planning or the social outcome. I would just like to stress this part. For example, we both agree, and I think any person studying any kind of urban settlement from whatever perspective would agree that to understand an urban settlement or to understand this whole complex that we call city, it's like the recognition of the complexity is like one of the most important things we all need to do. That's how we should start approaching the city. That's okay, what we are going to do is way too complex to be done by any one organ or any one institution or from any one approach, because when we're dealing with the city, we're dealing with almost everything. And I think this the problem, for example, that I usually find with such a big guns like UN or like the whole, even at the working at the state level, they usually have their own limitations. They usually have their limitations to identify something, to give a solution, and to just implement that solution on the ground, which definitely have some advantages, but at the same time some disadvantages as well. I think the scientific research, on the other hand, would make great contribution to make sure that the complexity can be realized by all of these actors who wants to change anything, who wants to introduce any change in that. For example, just to give you an example of these words that you are using, make city inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. I mean, from our experiences of India or Pakistan or Brazil, we already know that the inclusion would be entirely different for a person if he or she is like a woman from a minority group and having a like way too poor economic conditions. The resilient, for example, the safety would be entirely different discourse. It would be different for anyone in the city, for the middle class neighborhood, for the rich neighborhoods, condominiums, everyone would be having. So I think the scientific research would help us, would help everyone out to really make sense of these buzzwords, these big words, and to make it more rooted, to connect them to the experience of the people. Because I think what we need to do is, instead of just relying on the expert knowledge, I think probably it's the time to get some experience-based knowledge from the roots, from the ground root, and try to connect them. And I think the scientific research or the academia is a perfect bridge to do that.
That's an interesting point. Academia or the science as a bridge between the experience of the people and these policy goals of the UN, which are really broad. Is there a concrete policy advice you can give from your experiences in the field and your research? What would you say could be done to improve the situation for people living in slums?
I'm afraid that's something way too big, and probably I have to come up with something like as big as the guys in UN or like in any of the government would be saying. But I'm like, when I was trying to understand the things in Islamabad or Brasilia, and what I could find, for example, think we're talking about the informality, and we're talking about this a particular planning of the unplanned. I would suggest that we really need to be very sure that the data that we are collecting, the way we are approaching the problem, it should be as comprehensive as possible. There should not be a selected approach to collect data. There should not be a selected approach to understand the problem. I think the selectivity is something very dangerous. It's not good. It's not helping. And when we are not doing this selectivity, the thing I was referring to again, that it's when we need to bridge up the experiences and the expert knowledge. And by that, the only word I could think of is the democratization of the public policy as well. And this time, this democracy doesn't mean that you include people when you are translating something into a reality, but probably you should be including people right from the beginning. In our case, I would say people should be the part of that debate which are going to define what is slum, instead of me or like any other official is doing that.
Yeah, thanks. You want to add something to that?
I would like to say that maybe also connecting the last question of the task of a scientific community, and also the policy matter where we can contribute and how we can really contribute to it. So of course, you see, like how also ZEF works is that having this transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary approaches, it's very important to actually give policy advice. Me and Arslan as social science students cannot really give a concrete policy advice until and unless we have these broader, the people from other disciplines coming in. Not only that, but also transdisciplinary, like the activists and other networks of communities coming together. And adding to it, it's very important from my perspective at this point of time that we should start treating our respondents as intelligent and smart enough, and try to listen to them too. Listening to them is very important for any urban solution or city, and how it should be wherever we are. I think that's a very important aspect of democratizing the city, as Arslan mentioned.
Yeah, that's a very good conclusion. So to do things not from top to bottom, but from the bottom up. So really including the people who are affected and listen to them and their needs. Thank you. Thank you to both of you for being here today, and have a pleasant day.
You too. Thank you.